My name is Barbara, and 3 years ago, I had what most people would consider a dream life. I was married to Michael, a successful businessman who made enough money for us to live in a beautiful house in the suburbs. We had an adorable 3-year-old son, Tommy, with his father's dark hair and my green eyes. Before Tommy was born, I worked as an accountant at Anderson and Partners, a prestigious firm downtown. I loved my job, the satisfaction of balancing books, the friendly office environment, the sense of independence it gave me. Everything changed after Tommy's birth. Michael started insisting that I should stay home. "Barb, we don't need the money," he said one evening, bouncing Tommy on his knee. "Our son needs his mother at home. That's more important than any career." I wasn't entirely convinced, but then my parents jumped on the bandwagon too. Mom called me almost every day, telling me how lucky I was. "Barbara, honey, do you know how many women would kill to be in your position?" she'd say. "You have a wealthy husband who wants you to focus on your family. That's a blessing." But it was my younger sister Linda's words that finally tipped the scales. We were having coffee in my kitchen while Tommy napped upstairs. Linda, 2 years my junior and perpetually single, stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "God, Barb, you're living my dream," she sighed. "I'd give anything to marry someone like Michael. Stay home, take care of the house, raise kids. You're so lucky you don't have to work anymore." I remember looking at her that day, her perfectly manicured nails, designer clothes bought with our parents' money, not a care in the world. Linda had always been the pretty one, the social butterfly. I was the responsible older sister, the one who worked hard and played by the rules. So I quit my job. The first few months were nice, I suppose. I threw myself into being the perfect housewife and mother. I made elaborate meals, kept the house spotless, and spent hours playing with Tommy. Michael seemed pleased, always coming home with a smile and a kiss. But 6 months into my new life as a stay-at-home mom, things started to feel off. It was subtle at first, so subtle I thought I was imagining things. Michael started spending more time on his phone, smiling at messages when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd step out of rooms to take calls, speaking in hushed tones. One evening, when he hugged me after coming home late from another meeting, I caught a whiff of perfume. Not just any perfume, something familiar, a scent that tugged at my memory. But I couldn't place it, and I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself, watching him play with Tommy on the floor. "He's just busy with work. Everything's fine." But deep down, in that place where we keep the truths we're not ready to face, I knew something was wrong. I just had no idea how wrong, or how much my perfect life was about to implode. The suspicion was eating me alive. Every time Michael's phone buzzed, my stomach would clench. Every late meeting felt like a lie. I tried to push these thoughts away, but they kept creeping back, especially at night when I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing and wondering what he wasn't telling me. One evening, while Michael was taking his shower, I could hear the water running upstairs. I did something I'd never done before. I sat down at his laptop in his home office and logged into his work chat. My hands were shaking so badly I had to type his password twice. "There has to be something," I muttered to myself, scrolling through messages with his female employees. Sarah from accounting, Jenny from marketing, Emma from sales. But there was nothing. Just regular work conversations about meetings, deadlines, and project updates. No flirting, no secret messages, no plans to meet. I felt like an idiot. "You're losing it, Barbara," I told myself, closing the laptop. "He's your husband. He loves you. He loves Tommy." For a while, I managed to convince myself everything was fine. But then the late meetings started again. More phone calls. More secretive smiles at his phone screen. This time, I tried to check his personal phone, but it was always locked. He'd changed the password recently, claiming it was for work security. Then came that Sunday afternoon at my parents' house. It was one of our regular family visits. Mom was fussing over Tommy, Dad was watching football, and Linda was there too, looking particularly distracted. She kept checking her phone every few minutes. Suddenly, her phone rang. Linda jumped up like she'd been shocked. "Sorry, I've got to run," she said, grabbing her purse. "Super important meeting." I noticed she'd left her phone on the coffee table in her rush. I picked it up, thinking I'd run after her to return it. That's when the screen lit up with a new message. From Michael. "My love, got us a table at La Marina for 6 p.m. Can't wait to hold you in my arms again. These stolen moments are never enough." The phone slipped from my numb fingers onto the couch. La Marina. Michael's favorite restaurant. Where he'd proposed to me 5 years ago. Everything suddenly clicked into place. The familiar perfume I'd smelled on him was Linda's signature scent. The one Mom and Dad had given her last Christmas. The one she always wore too much of. My husband wasn't having an affair with someone from his office. He was having an affair with my sister. I sat in my car outside La Marina, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. It was 5:55 p.m. Through the large windows, I could see them, my husband and my sister, at what used to be our regular table. Stay calm, I told myself. Just stay calm. But calm flew out the window when I saw Michael lean across the table and kiss Linda. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss. His hand was on her cheek, the same way he used to touch mine. I don't really remember walking into the restaurant. One moment I was in my car, the next I was standing by their table, watching them spring apart like guilty teenagers. "Barbara," Linda gasped. "I can explain." I didn't let her finish. The glass of red wine in front of me seemed to lift itself and splash across her perfect white blouse. Michael jumped up, and somehow my hand found a plate of spaghetti. It made a satisfying splat against his expensive suit. "You backstabbing pieces of shit," I screamed. The restaurant went silent. Michael tried to grab my arms. "Barbara, stop. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I kicked him in the shin. Hard. "You want a scene? I'll give you a damn scene." I don't know everything I said after that. It's all a blur of cursing and screaming. I remember calling them every name in the book. I remember Linda crying. I remember Michael trying to restrain me while I kicked and fought. I think the cops even came. Security eventually escorted us out. In the parking lot, Michael tried to follow me to my car. "Barbara, please, let's talk about this like adults." "Adults?" I spun around. "Adults don't sleep with their wife's sister." At home, the fight continued. Tommy was thankfully at my parents' house, my parents, who I later learned knew about the affair but chose to stay quiet. "I want a divorce," I told Michael, throwing clothes into a suitcase. He grabbed my arm. "You're not taking my son. I'll fight you on this. You just assaulted 2 people in a public place. You really think any judge will give you custody?" That stopped me cold. He was right, I'd lost control. I'd given him ammunition. "I won't give you a divorce," he continued. "And if you try to take Tommy, I'll sue you for full custody. Think about that." I needed help, professional help. And suddenly, I remembered Rachel Stevens from college. We'd studied in parallel programs. She went into law while I chose accounting. Last I heard, she'd become quite successful handling divorce cases. I found her number online and called immediately. "Rachel? It's Barbara Collins, well, Barbara Mitchell now. But hopefully not for much longer. I need your help." "Barbara? Oh my God, it's been ages. What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "How much do you know about custody battles?" "That's actually my specialty," she said. "Want to come to my office tomorrow? We can talk about options." For the first time since seeing that message on Linda's phone, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could fight back after all. The courtroom felt suffocating. I sat next to Rachel, trying to keep my hands from shaking as the proceedings began. Michael sat across the aisle with his expensive lawyer, looking polished and composed in his designer suit. Rachel stood up first. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of infidelity. Mr. Mitchell was caught in an intimate situation with his wife's sister, Linda Parker. This betrayal, combined with his controlling behavior throughout their marriage, makes Mrs. Mitchell the more suitable parent for their child." I felt a surge of confidence. Then Michael's lawyer called him to testify. "Mrs. Mitchell completely misunderstood the situation," Michael said, his voice steady. "I was meeting Linda to plan Barbara's surprise birthday party. It was supposed to be next month. We were discussing decoration ideas and guest lists when Barbara burst in and attacked us. I nearly jumped out of my seat." "What?" Rachel squeezed my arm, warning me to stay quiet. "And this wasn't the first time," Michael continued. "Barbara has a history of jealous outbursts. She's created scenes at my office parties, accused female colleagues of flirting with me, all in front of our son. Tommy is terrified when she gets like this." My parents were called to testify next. Mom walked to the stand, not even looking in my direction. "Is what Mr. Mitchell saying true?" his lawyer asked. Mom nodded. "Yes, we knew about the birthday planning meeting. We were supposed to be there too, but we were running late. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My own mother was lying under oath." Then Dad testified, backing up their story. But the worst was yet to come. Linda took the stand, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Barbara has always been unstable. When we were kids, she would hit me, push me around. She bullied other children in the neighborhood too." "That's a lie," I couldn't help shouting. The judge warned me to be quiet. "She needs help," Linda continued. "I've seen how she treats Tommy. The screaming, the mood swings. I've been worried about him for months." My parents nodded from their seats, and Mom spoke up again. "We had to take Barbara to a psychotherapist when she was young. She's had anger management issues all her life." I wanted to scream. Yes, I'd seen a therapist, because I was painfully shy and had trouble making friends. Not because I was violent. Never because I was violent. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. "Don't react," she whispered. "That's what they want." I sat there, numb, as my entire family painted me as an unstable, dangerous mother. Every word they spoke felt like another knife in my back. My sister, who I'd protected from bullies when we were kids. My parents, who'd driven me to those therapy sessions to help with my social anxiety. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Officer James Peterson took the stand. At approximately 6:15 p.m. on May 12, we responded to a disturbance at La Marina restaurant, he testified, reading from his report. The suspect, identified as Barbara Mitchell, was witnessed throwing food and beverages at two individuals while shouting obscenities. Multiple patrons reported feeling threatened by her aggressive behavior. Michael's lawyer stood up, holding a USB drive. "Your Honor, we have security footage from the restaurant that corroborates these events." The courtroom lights dimmed, and my humiliation played out on the screen. There I was, screaming and throwing things, looking exactly like the unstable person they claimed I was. "Your Honor," Rachel interjected, "we request to see the complete footage, including the moments before this incident." My client maintains that she witnessed her husband and sister in an intimate embrace. The restaurant's security manager took the stand. "I apologize, but the camera in that section was only activated by the motion sensors when Mrs. Mitchell entered. We don't have footage from before the incident." How convenient. I looked at my family, Mom and Dad sitting rigid in their seats, Linda dabbing at fake tears, Michael looking concerned and reasonable. These people who had known me my entire life, who had watched me grow up, who knew the truth, they all betrayed me. The judge's decision felt like a physical blow. Given the evidence presented, including testimony about Mrs. Mitchell's history of emotional instability and the recent violent outburst, the court finds it in the best interest of the minor child to remain in the primary custody of the father. I stopped breathing. Furthermore, Mrs. Mitchell will be required to pay monthly child support in the amount of $800. But I don't even have a job. I burst out. They made me quit. Mrs. Mitchell, control yourself, the judge warned. Your outbursts are not helping your case. I left the courthouse in a daze. I couldn't go home, it wasn't my home anymore. I couldn't go to my parents. I had nowhere to go. Somehow, I found myself at the Copper Pot, a small Italian restaurant where Michael and I used to have date nights. I slid into a corner booth and finally let the tears come. Honey, are you okay? A warm voice broke through my sobs. I looked up to see Maria, the owner, standing there with concern in her eyes. I'd always liked her, she used to slip Tommy extra cookies whenever we came in. The whole story poured out of me between sobs, the affair, the betrayal, losing Tommy, everything. Maria listened quietly, then sat down across from me. Listen, Bambina. I have a small apartment upstairs that I rent out. The tenant just moved out last week. And I need a new waitress, Jessie just quit to go to college. I wiped my eyes, staring at her. The apartment isn't fancy, but it's clean and safe. And the job, well, it's not accounting, but it's honest work. You can start tomorrow if you want. It's amazing how quickly life can change. 2 years after that horrible day in court, I barely recognized my own life. Maria turned out to be not just my employer, but my saving grace. I started as a waitress, learning the rhythm of restaurant work. It wasn't easy, my feet ached, customers could be demanding, and the pay wasn't great. But it was honest work, and more importantly, it kept me busy. Too busy to dwell on everything I'd lost. Within 6 months, Maria promoted me to administrator. You have a head for numbers, she said, referring to my accounting background. And the staff respects you. A year later, she made me restaurant manager. The promotion came with a decent raise, enough that I could finally start saving a little after paying rent and Tommy's alimony. Tommy. My heart still breaks every time I write that check, knowing it's the only connection I have left to my son. Michael made sure of that. Sorry, Barbara, Tommy's not feeling well today, he'd say when I tried to arrange visits. Oh, we already have plans this weekend. Tommy's at his grandparents'. Always an excuse. Always a cancellation. 2 years of them. I called every lawyer I could find, but they all said the same thing. Ms. Mitchell, the last one said, reviewing my file, with your history. You mean the lies they told about me? He sighed. The court doesn't see them as lies. They see sworn testimony from your family, police reports, video evidence. Before we could even think about reopening this case, you'd need extensive documentation showing you've received psychological treatment. But I'm not psychotic, I protested. I never was. I understand that, but perception is reality in family court. And right now, the perception is that you're unstable. Without proof of treatment and a very expensive legal team, you don't have a chance. I still had the small apartment above the Copper Pot. Still worked 60-hour weeks. Still sent those alimony checks like clockwork. But I hadn't seen my son's face in 2 years. I cut off all contact with my family. Mom tried calling a few times early on, but I blocked her number. I didn't want to know how Linda was doing, or if my parents felt guilty. They made their choice. They chose Michael's money over their own daughter's happiness. One night, cleaning up after closing, I found a child's drawing left behind on a table. A simple crayon sketch of a family, mom, dad, kid. I sat down right there and cried for the first time in months. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was doing inventory at the restaurant. I almost didn't answer when I saw Mom flash across my screen. I'd unblocked their numbers months ago, but never responded. Something made me pick up this time. Barbara? Mom's voice sounded different, older, desperate. Please don't hang up. What do you want? My voice came out harder than I intended. We need to talk to you. It's important. Please, sweetheart. Please come to the house. I should have said no. After everything they'd done, I had every right to refuse. But there was something in her voice that got to me. Fine. I'll be there in an hour. Maria gave me the rest of the day off when I told her where I was going. Walking up to my childhood home was surreal. The paint was peeling, the garden Mom had always kept pristine was overgrown, and Dad's precious car was missing from the driveway. They looked older when they opened the door, much older than 2 years should have aged them. "Sit down, Barbara," Dad said, his voice trembling. "We need to tell you everything." I perched on the edge of the sofa, my hand slipping into my purse where I'd stashed my phone, quietly starting the voice recorder app. I didn't trust them anymore, I couldn't afford to. Mom started crying before they even began. "We're so sorry, baby. We're so sorry." "Michael," Dad's voice cracked. "He offered us a deal. Said he'd buy us a new house. You know how long we've struggled with the mortgage on this place. All we had to do was help him destroy me," I finished coldly. Mom sobbed harder. "He promised it would all work out. Said once he had custody, you'd still see Tommy regularly. Said it was better for everyone." "Better for everyone?" I stood up, shaking. "I haven't seen my son in 2 years. Neither have we," Dad burst out. "He cut us all off as soon as the court case was over. Stopped answering our calls. Changed their numbers. We don't even know where they live now." "What about Linda?" I asked. "Isn't she still with him?" Mom's face crumpled. "He left her a month after the divorce was final. Said she was just a bit of fun. She had a complete breakdown. Tried to hurt herself." "We're about to lose the house," Dad added quietly. "The house he promised to buy us, it was all lies. We betrayed our own daughter for nothing." I sat there, listening to them pour out the whole ugly truth. How Michael had manipulated them. How he'd played on their financial fears. How they'd realized too late that they'd been used. "We need your help, Barbara," Mom pleaded. "Not just with money, we need to make this right. We need to tell the truth about what happened. We need to help you get Tommy back. And Linda, she needs her big sister," Dad added. "She won't talk to anyone else." I looked at my parents, these broken, foolish people who'd thrown away our family for empty promises, and felt a strange mix of pity and determination. I called Rachel as soon as I left their house. "Remember how you said we needed new evidence?" I played her a snippet of the recording. "Holy shit, Barbara," she breathed. "This changes everything. Your parents could face serious charges for perjury." "I know," I said. "But right now, I don't care about punishment. I care about getting my son back. Can you file the papers today?" The second trial felt different from the first. This time, I walked into the courtroom with evidence, not just accusations. This time, I had the truth on my side. My parents testified first, confirming everything from their recorded confession. Mom could barely look at Michael as she detailed his manipulation and lies. The court fell silent when she described how he'd promised them financial security in exchange for their false testimony. "The medical records are clear, Your Honor," Rachel presented the documentation. Barbara Mitchell attended therapy sessions from ages 12 to 14 for social anxiety and shyness. There is no history of violent behavior or aggression. Then I saw my son. Tommy was taller now, thinner than I remembered. He looked at me with uncertain eyes, like he was trying to place a face from a half-forgotten dream. My heart ached, seeing how withdrawn he seemed, nothing like the bubbly 3-year-old I'd lost. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood on shaky legs. "Your Honor, I've waited 2 years to see my son. 2 years of canceled visits and denied calls. But looking at my family now, I see that everyone has suffered." I took a deep breath. My parents are elderly and sick. They made a terrible mistake, but they've lost everything because of it. My sister's mental health has been severely damaged. I'm asking the court to show mercy in their sentencing. The judge's verdict came swiftly. My parents received a suspended sentence and a $50,000 fine. Linda was sentenced to 2 years of correctional labor and mandatory psychiatric treatment. Michael's punishment was more severe, a $500,000 fine and 2 years in prison for orchestrating the perjury and deliberately alienating a child from their parent. The look on his face when they led him away, I'll never forget it. The court awards full custody of Thomas Mitchell to his mother, Barbara Mitchell. Those beautiful words I'd waited 2 years to hear. That was 6 months ago. Today, Tommy and I live in a beautiful apartment that I bought with the settlement money from Michael. It's not as grand as our old house, but it's ours. Really ours. The restaurant continues to do well. Maria made me full partner last month. Between my salary and the settlement, I can easily manage the mortgage payments. Tommy's starting to come out of his shell, making friends at his new school. I heard through the grapevine that Michael's business collapsed while he was in prison. His parents called once, asking to see Tommy, but I refused. They knew what their son had done and stayed silent. They don't get to be part of our lives now. As for my own family, I don't know how they're doing. I don't want to know. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive them, but not yet. Not while the wounds are still healing.